Careful not to get too close to the candle. Otherwise, my kids will definitely have a story to tell tomorrow when I show up. Well, I'm honored and humbled to be standing before you this evening right now. When Pastor Chris asked me to speak, I was stunned, and I thought, I don't have enough in my life to be able to consider my relationship to the scripture of the Good Samaritan from today. Then when I contemplated it a little bit more, I chose to stop doubting myself and instead share what drives me to serve, what drives me to live a life where I don't want to stop understanding others. And I'm no expert. I don't pretend to be. I don't want to be. For the moment I think I fully understand is the day that I stop learning. So I stand before you now and ask for your compassion and understanding through my imperfect and still evolving self. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus discusses showing love to God as well as to our neighbors. Although this is a well-known parable to many of us, I began reflecting on a key few aspects of the story that I thought were kind of important, thinking about my own life. And first, Jesus says that we must love God with our heart, as well as with our soul and our strength and mind. And of course, he goes on to say we must love our neighbors as ourselves. And as I've reflected on my own personal faith journey, I realize I can see where I've acted on these ideas kind of on and off throughout my life, and oftentimes ignoring one or more aspects of these parts of my life, while at other times being keenly aware of where I wanted to be. I was blessed to have two incredible parents who demonstrated service each and every day of their lives. My mother is here today. My mother's volunteering resume spans as many decades as it does interest areas, between her hospice volunteering to volunteering on a variety of school and church committees, and to now mentoring elementary students. Thankfully, they're my students on a weekly basis. She's provided me with a God-filled way of loving and living to serve. My father also demonstrated his desire to serve through his leadership roles way back when he was a teacher in FFA, president of the church council, and his willingness to even serve the medical community by being part of a medical trial, even though he knew he wouldn't directly benefit before he died, but he knew others in the future would benefit long after he lost his battle with cancer. Some of my most vivid memories of service actually come right here in this building and out in the world through Easter, before I became an adult. I had the incredible opportunity to go on several mission trips, and one such trip I particularly remember is our trip to Denver, Colorado. Not only did I make lifelong friends on this journey, but I was forced to face the reality of how privileged I was, to begin to understand my assumptions that were very often misplaced, and to be humbled by what others offered me more than I could ever offer them. This evolution continued as I went to the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wind River, Wyoming, the following summer. I was humbled as we were invited to participate in a powwow with the local tribe. The way they revered Mother Earth, provided each other with gifts that were both symbolic but also necessary, as well as the willingness to open up their traditions to us, were so humbling. Then to live and work alongside them, listen to their stories, and better understand the way this group of people had suffered and yet still persevered, allowed me to break down barriers in my own thinking of a particular group of people. I continued my journey of loving God through strength in our work in Seattle, Washington the following summer through our next mission trip. Then I went off to college, and after graduating from the University of Michigan with a degree in elementary education, I chose to return to Minnesota to begin my career in education. I was beginning my journey of loving God through my heart and soul at this point. I had the great fortune to begin my career at an elementary on the east side of St. Paul. I remember as I was being hired, the principal leaned over his desk and looked at me straight in the eye and asked me 3 different times, "Are you sure you really want to be here?" And I said yes every single time as a new and eager teacher, and thus began the next phase of my evolution. You see, I was so naive that I thought I would go in there to change and make the lives of these children better. But what I didn't understand until much later was that first, that isn't the goal of an educator. 2, how narrow-minded of me to think that they needed or even wanted to be changed and made better. And 3, as many educators already know, our children always teach us way more than I could ever teach them. As I worked through these difficult times in my first years of teaching, and there were plenty of them, I slowly began to understand the bigger purpose of why I was there. I had this unique window into a world most of my friends and family never had an opportunity to view. Or, if viewed, it was through more of a biased or clouded window, perhaps. However, I could begin to be the voice of my students. And not because they couldn't, but because, like it or not, I had some power in society that they didn't yet possess. Most students I worked with lived in poverty. They represented a variety of races and cultures, and many spoke lots of languages from around the world. I was typically one, if not the only, white person in the room. To the outside world, they may have seemed like they had so much going against them. However, slowly, I began to see that some of these so-called obstacles were somewhat assets. Now, don't get me wrong, living in poverty is not an asset in and of itself. However, the adaptations that my students had to make by their particular situations helped them in a way that many other students wouldn't have the opportunity to learn how to adjust in those ways, including myself. As I continued my career, I had the opportunity to work at the district level with a variety of teachers, schools, administrators, and stakeholders. And I'll just for a minute say these are 2 out of the 3 students that I had in that previous picture, and I kept up with them. I actually started a book club with them, and every month I'd pick them up and I'd take them to dinner or coffee, and we'd discuss a book. And so this is them in 9th grade, and the author of the book we were reading actually came to town. So I picked them up and we went. I think my mom was along for that one too. And now they are first year, freshmen in college, and so I've been able to keep up with them from when they were in my classroom in 4th grade, and that's 9th grade, and now today they're all in college. So at the district where I was at the time, we were entering a time when racial equity was a very large focus of our professional development. And this is where I began to love God more through my mind as well as my soul. Through this thorough examination of my own personal bias, and yes, I had many, I began to evolve again in understanding how to view the world differently through the eyes of which I did not yet understand. I cannot change my race. However, it is completely in my control to determine how to interpret anything I read, discuss, or experience. It's also in my control to provide another perspective when speaking with someone else about race, poverty, or culture. During this time, I also had the opportunity to work with Project Home, some of you may be familiar with, a program that partnered teachers from the school district to work at the revolving homeless shelters that were set up in a different church each month in St. Paul. Now, as you may know, it's too easy to begin to judge this population of people and begin to make assumptions as to why they were in the situations they were in. However, once I began to understand through some professional development, as well as the experience I had there, that for the reasons of homelessness, I began to listen instead of judge. Thus began my experience, listen first, teach second. Now, I've entered another phase of my evolution. I'm slowly bringing together my love of God through my heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'm now at a different school district, one of which is changing as we begin to see more students representing a variety of races, living in poverty, and from a variety of cultures and countries. There's an evolution happening that I can choose to be a part of, choose to speak up for another perspective, or I can choose to stay silent because it might be easier or less confrontational. For someone who grew up hating confrontations, I've slowly learned how to speak up for what is right, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable. This has been a long journey for me, one of which I am not proud of how long it took to even get to this point, and I have a very long way to go. However, if I can continue to seek action instead of complacency, I think I'll be moving forward. Recently, I had the wonderful opportunity to be part of a book club discussion here at Easter around the book Waking Up White. One reflection I walked away with for myself is understanding that I must move forward beyond the guilt, beyond the frustration, beyond the talk, and actually take action. Earlier this year, I chose action as my word of the year. Subsequently, my dear friend purchased a bracelet for me that has this word action on it, written on the front from the My Intent Project, if any of you have heard of that or seen that maybe on social media. She so gracefully wrote them my story in order to get this bracelet, and here's what she wrote. A friend of mine is a gifted teacher, but she is struggling with how to impact her students, neighborhood, and the world around her. I want this bracelet to be a reminder that she's got what she needs already within her to create a better place. Now, I feel the only reason I have what I already need is because I'm reminded of Jesus' promise to us in the story of the Good Samaritan. I'm so grateful for this bracelet as it's now a visual reminder for me. I was once again reminded to listen first. More than anything in my career, I have learned to listen, and hopefully more recently, I'm learning how to listen without judgment. When I can clear my filters and truly listen, I can begin to hear how God is calling me to be part of this bigger mission. So I ask all of you today to reflect on today's message from the book of Luke. There were 4 main things that Jesus was asking the lawyer, and essentially all of us, to do. Love with all of your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And I ask you, which one will you consider as you begin to take action in your own life? Will you serve with your soul, showing empathy towards others? Might that be listening to someone who just wants to share their story? How might you keep that story in your heart to share at another time to open up another person's heart? Might you serve with your strength? What might you commit to on a regular basis to show up with your strength? I recently saw a news feature about a young man who made it a goal to volunteer every day for an entire year at Feed My Starving Children. He never missed a day during that entire year. What a commitment. Might you take action through your mind? Might you read more books by authors who don't look like you, who challenge your current beliefs? Might you engage in groups who are reaching out to individuals who might be marginalized? How are you going to show up through action? Through service? What might that service look like for you in your personal journey with God? As one of my favorite quotes states, the longest journey begins with a single step. Which step will you take today to make your journey move forward and continue showing love to God and to your neighbor tomorrow and all the days after that?